Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we conclude a 4-day program on a moonshot mission for men with a focus on men's health and well-being within the context of the larger world situation and evolution of human consciousness. It's an extraordinary thing to contemplate that after thousands of years of patriarchy, during which men ruled supreme, essentially worldwide, and nature and women were subordinated, that the reality that we are confronted by in our time is that men are living weaker and dying earlier than women are. And so as we contemplate the future of humanity, as we evaluate the explosive empowerment of women over the last decades since the Second World War, the greatest challenge that I think humanity really faces is to deal with the men. They have been devastated in ways that are only beginning to be understood. And so over the last several days, we've contemplated a number of issues that are pertaining to this very deep challenge. And today, as we conclude our program, we want to look at what a mature man actually looks like and feels like, and what men can do given the systemic challenges that they face to create a pathway, not only for themselves in terms of mutual support and mutual well-being, as they reevaluate the relationships, not only with one another, but with women in the larger world, what maturity looks like. What are some goals that are achievable given the historical realities from which all of us are now emerging? So thank you for joining us today. I'd like to now turn the program over to Molly Corona, who will lead us in a centering exercise and tee up the program. And then I'll circle back toward the end for a deeper dialogue with the panelists. But welcome, everyone. Molly?
Thank you, Jim. It's been a wonderful 4 days. So I want to invite everyone with us right now, if you want to participate in a little grounding practice. I'll invite you, if that feels resonant, to maybe bring one of your palms on your forehead and the other palm on your brainstem, on the base of your skull. And maybe at this point, you want to close your eyes or soften your gaze. Maybe just allow yourself to see what's like to receive the support from your hands holding your cranium right now. Whatever that is, just notice. And I'll invite you from this space to maybe notice if there's any other place in your body that really wants some attention right now, some self-soothing touch. You might want to send your hands, one of your hands to your chest or both. You might want to hug yourself. You might want to place a hand on your shoulder. Just notice what's calling you. What part of your body wants a little bit of attention and care right now? And wherever that is, just stay with that, offering this nice self-soothing touch to yourself, and notice, what's it like to receive that right now? And you might want to stay with that self-soothing touch, or you might want to go for another part of your body that needs a little bit care of attention right now. But wherever that is, I also want to invite you, if that feels resonant, to maybe bring to mind some words of support, of appreciation that someone has offered to you sometime, anytime. Maybe someone said, "You're a generous person. You're a good friend." So as you continue to offer that self-soothing touch to your body, just allow yourself to receive those words as well. Maybe say them to yourself. I'm a generous person. I'm a good friend. Whatever it is that was offered to you, just say that to yourself. And notice, what's it like to receive the words and the touch? And for our last exploration, you might want to stay with the same self-soothing touch, or maybe send a little bit more care to a different part of your body. So while you're offering the touch to yourself, now imagine someone who cares about you. It can be someone from your life in the present. It can be from the past. It can be any spiritual presence. It can be your pet. So once you've imagined that someone who cares about you, imagine they are looking at you with compassion. And they are offering those words of support and appreciation to you. And just take some time to receive the impact of this. You're offering yourself a little touch with care, with support. And you're noticing this beautiful presence of someone who cares about you, offering words of support. You're kind. You're a good person. Whatever those words are to you. And in your own time, at your own pace, when it feels right to maybe open your eyes if they were closed, I'll invite you to just allow your eyes to look around your space, softly, gently. Allow your eyes to go wherever they want to go. Just reminding yourself that you're here and now. And when you're ready, we'll invite you to come back into the Zoom room. And I'll invite Dr. Jed Diamond and Joe Conrad to continue with our program.
Thank you, Molly. That was wonderful. Just to share at the beginning, I connected with words from my father. My father had left when I was 5 years old, and throughout my life, I had a very troubled relationship with him. Reconnected with him a number of times, and he disowned me each time out of his own woundedness. And in the latter part of his life, he was able to reconnect with me and to share words of love and care that I felt again when you offered the opportunity to connect. And for those who don't know me yet, we've been together for some time now with these groups. I'm Dr. Jed Diamond. I'm the founder of Men Alive and the convener of this Moonshot for Mankind, which you'll hear more about in a minute. And one of the aspects of mature masculinity that Frederick will be talking about shortly, I believe, has to do with healing the father wound. And among the books that I've written, there was one called My Distant Dad, Healing the Family Father Wound. And I offered a quote, which I'd like to share, from the psychologist James Hollis. He says, a father may be physically present, but absent in spirit. His absence may be literal through death, divorce, or dysfunction, but more often it is a symbolic absence through silence and the inability to transmit what he also may not have acquired. So I think in many ways, we're all looking for healing in various ways. And all of us, I think, have healing to do with our fathers, our mothers, other intimate parts of our family background. Now, 2 years ago, I invited a number of colleagues to join me in what I call the Moonshot for Mankind and Humanity. And I invited a mixture of people, but what they all had in common were colleagues that were doing significantly positive and important work in the area of men and family healing and their mental, emotional, and relational well-being. One of the people that I invited was Joe Conrad, who I'd like to welcome again today and to share a bit more about the Moonshot for Mankind that we've been involved with for some time now. Joe?
Thank you, Jed. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you again today. So my name is Joe Conrad. I founded a marketing branding firm called Cactus 33 years ago as a purpose-driven agency. And our mission has always been to grow brands that help people thrive. And that's led us to do a lot of interesting purpose-driven work, behavior change campaigns, social marketing campaigns. And in 2012, we launched what has come to be one of the most successful and highly recognized efforts that I've ever been involved in. And that's a campaign called Man Therapy. It is a suicide prevention campaign targeting working age men, but we really take an upstream early intervention and preventative approach. So Man Therapy really is a men's mental health campaign. And that campaign we launched in 2012 is still alive and growing and having influence today. And that's what led me to this group. Jed reached out to me about 2 years ago and invited me to be a part of this Moonshot for Mankind group. And I am really honored to be joined by the other colleagues that are the founding members of the Moonshot for Mankind. And we came together around this common goal of trying to capture and spread this message about the challenges facing men today and the negative consequences that has, not just on men, but also on their families, their friends, the community, and the world in general. It's a topic that's getting more and more attention, but I think we've only really scratched the surface and really bringing to light this very important topic. So as we were meeting each month as a group, trying to figure a path forward, we really saw the power and strength in numbers. What if we could recruit other people, other organizations working in men's health, and individuals, men and women who are also wanting to be a part of this effort? What if we could bring them together and create a gathering place, a hub where we can share information, create a place where they can network and collaborate, and really try to get some traction in creating a movement. You can't really create a movement without a lot of different people contributing. And we felt like we needed a brand, an identity to really draw people to our mission. And also we needed a gathering place, a website. So we built a website. You can find that at moonshotformankind.com. It's a place where you can come learn more about this issue, share information with one another. You can take a pledge if you're an individual or an organization. The pledge was written by Frederick Marx for individuals and Ed Fronheim for organizations. And you can also register to join the movement, to get more information and to network and collaborate with others doing this important work. And then finally, we felt like we really needed to create a brand manifesto video, something that really told our story in a 2.5-minute film that really captured the importance of this issue and invited other people to join us on this journey on the Moonshot for Mankind. So we would very much like to share that video with you as a way to kick off today's session.
Man, the ultimate work in progress, constantly growing and evolving, contributing and accomplishing. But the path of progress is imperfect. And right now, we're experiencing a setback. Today, in every country across the globe, men live sicker and die younger than women. They're graduating at lower rates, being imprisoned more frequently, and are suffering from stress, depression, loneliness, alcoholism, substance abuse, and disease. Their pain is manifesting in acts of self-harm, suicide, violence, and destruction.
Commence launch sequence, T-minus 20.
The problems of individual men, when amplified, become the problems of all mankind, threatening not only our progress, but our very survival.
We are all systems go. You have permission to launch.
But if each man's problems and pains have the ability to cause exponential damage, it must also be true that each man who commits himself to living mentally, physically, and emotionally healthier has the power to create exponential good. This is how we change the narrative.
9.
This is our moonshot for mankind.
5.
We believe man's mental, emotional, and relational health is the key to empowering men to live long and well. So our mission is to help men live healthier, happier, more cooperative lives, fulfilling lives of purpose and productivity, where men are supported and valued as they make positive contributions to their families, friends, and communities. When that happens, families grow stronger, communities prosper, and humanity takes its next leap forward.
1. We have liftoff.
Together, we are an ever-expanding force for the good of all mankind, fueled by the commitments of individual men, bolstered by the support of their loved ones, and multiplied by millions of men across the globe. The journey to heal humanity has begun. Join us and imagine what we can accomplish.
Now we will invite Frederick to introduce us to today's topic on mature masculinity.
Hi, everyone. Really good to be here with you all today. I'm excited that I actually finally got to see the video intact. The previous days of the week, it's been showing up on my screen as a broken slideshow with intermittent audio. So it really gave me just the little nudge that I needed to begin my talk today. It's such a wonderful piece, and it's really inspiring. So this week, we've spent a lot of time talking about various challenges that men face to maintain mental, physical, emotional, and relational health. So I thought it might be helpful to focus on the standards that can get us there today. In a sense, I want to gently nudge us away from what might need improving in many men toward what might already be working and how we can maintain it. And so that's why I decided to shift the talk from what was originally advertised about communal relations to talk about mature masculinity. So I thought it might be helpful to actually venture into a definition of it so that hopefully it doesn't need to remain some mysterious, nebulous, elusive thing out there that no one cares to even bother trying to define, much less to reach for and achieve. In fact, for me, I actually try to enact these principles every day. I live by them. And it's my roadmap for breaking out of the man box. And I do hope that it might serve some of you. So a lot of what I'll be talking about is, in some degree, elaboration on what we've already built into our 5-point men's wellness vow, which, as Joe just mentioned a few minutes ago, is on the website. And I really want to remind you and encourage you to please go to the website and sign up. It's our simple but ambitious aim to get a million men to sign it, to stand up in solidarity with what we're doing, and to take one more very simple step forward to becoming the man that they've always wanted to be. This week, we've highlighted other tremendous resources available to all of us in the way of support. Joe mentioned Man Therapy, Lisa's The Good Men Project, Jed's books, including Long Live Men. And so today I want to add a few more resources of my own to the record to make sure you all know about them. And most of them are available for free from us at Warrior Films. And our website is warriorfilms.org. But before even getting into those, I want to take you on a bit of a detour. And the detour is into explaining what I've been working on for much of the last 27 years and why. To briefly recount what I said on Tuesday about my own personal history, I myself was an unmentored, uninitiated teen yearning for a pathway to mature masculinity. My father died when I was 9 of a sudden heart attack. He was only 41. And on our way to the funeral, my uncle, his younger brother, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Well, Freddie, you're the man of the house now." And I wanted very much to be that man, to be of support to my mother, older sister, and younger brother, to take a position of leadership in the family. And like all 9-year-old boys, I was woefully unequipped for that. But what made it worse was that I was abandoned by my uncle and by his father, my grandfather, and by all the men in my parents' extended network of family and friends. No one showed up for me. So that seed planted by my uncle was left germinating in me for the remainder of my life. And like Jed just mentioned a few minutes ago, healing that father wound, whether our fathers are literally absent, like mine was in my case, or figuratively absent, is an essential part of this journey, I think, for all of us to realize mature masculinity. So as a boy and a teen, I was left to my own devices to try to figure out how do I become that man? And I did my best to cobble together a working image of mature masculinity from movies and TV, from things I read, and by closely watching the behavior of other men. And in fact, that life strategy persisted with me until 2 weeks shy of my 40th birthday. And it was then that I did the Mankind Project workshop called the New Warrior Training Adventure. That was in October 1995. And to this day, I consider it my long overdue initiation into manhood. That was what I was unconsciously seeking ever since I was a teen. On that weekend, not just one man, but 45 men showed up for me. And my life was never the same. It changed everything for me. Not only my personal life, it completely changed my professional life too. It's informed everything that my company, Warrior Films, is about. Even the name harkens back to that weekend. So I thought I should take a moment to explain. I've been on a mission to reappropriate the term warrior, to bring it back to its original meaning and positive connotations. Not soldier, not killer, not savage, but more akin to samurai, similar in some ways maybe to the Knights of the Round Table, men driven by a nobility of purpose to defend and honor all that deserves defending and honoring. Here's what Sitting Bull said in the late 1870s. And if you don't know the name Sitting Bull, he was the last Native American chief to surrender to the colonialists, the invaders of his country, also known as the American government. Warriors are not what you think of as warriors. The warrior is not someone who fights, because no one has the right to take another life. The warrior is one who sacrifices himself for the good of others, His task is to take care of the elderly, the defenseless, those who cannot provide for themselves, and above all, the children, the future of humanity. Here's our mission statement. Warrior Films inspires needed social change by telling compelling stories, highlighting transformational solutions. So my initiation taught me that this archetypal energy of the warrior is not something that is bad, that must be suppressed. Having grown up in a pacifist family, that's what I always understood. That's what I was led to believe. Now I understand that that energy that boys typically have of playing with guns and emulating warfare and fantasizing about killing and dying need not be suppressed. It needs to be recontextualized. The boy needs to understand he's unconsciously preparing for a lifetime of service to the well-being of his family and community, to the elderly, the defenseless, those who cannot provide for themselves, and above all, the children. I want to share with you the very first paragraph I wrote in 2003 when I founded Warrior Films. And I can't help but pridefully note that it was just 2 weeks ago we celebrated our 20th anniversary. And I wrote it back then to articulate what it was I wanted to do with the company and why, to point the direction forward. Quote, "We live in dangerous times. We ask ourselves who or what is going to change things for the better. I ask myself that. And the answer that comes back loud and clear from me is I have to. I have to take the lead to play my part in making this world a better place. And it's going to take the energy and passion and commitment of a warrior to do it." Now, as a side note, I got to say that in 2003, I actually worried that those words were an overstatement, perhaps an exaggeration. And now 20 years later, I'm wondering if they're even strong enough. So without doubt, it takes the energy and passion and commitment of a warrior to make change. Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Harvey Milk, these men were many things, but they were absolutely warriors as well. So this is where I'd like to tie directly back into what we were discussing yesterday and pose a simple question, which always seems pressing to me. While we're embarking on that greater mission to dismantle, or as someone put it, I think 2 days ago, global predatory capitalism, to fix this disaster of a world that we're living in, how do we reach for and hopefully still find some measure of fulfillment in our individual lives? Answering that question is exactly what our work at Warrior Films has been about. Telling the stories of individuals who suffer from all the restrictions and oppressions of culture, economics, class, all the isms that are forced upon us, not to mention catastrophic climate change, not to mention putting men in the man box. Still, somehow these people, these salt of the earth people, find their way through to some form of fulfillment in their personal lives. The film that I'm most known for, Hoop Dreams, is no small introduction to the challenges African-American teen boys face in transitioning into the adult world. Partly because of that film, and following my own initiation, I started researching initiation and mentorship practices around the world. That research found its way into pretty much all of my subsequent films. My fiction feature film, The Unspoken, about a traumatized young man who steps toward healing through the confluence of three forces: the natural world, the love of a woman, and the sudden emergence of a male mentor. I made a TV miniseries called Boys to Men, which takes a penetrating look at 15 and 16-year-old boys, totally different boys across race, class, and culture, reflecting every conceivable socioeconomic difference, all of them flailing mightily to find a workable image of mature masculinity to align their lives with. I also made a 5-film series on veterans caught in the middle of an incomplete rite of passage due to their years of service. A handshake, a pat on the back, and thank you for your service have never been sufficient to psychically and emotionally ground servicemen and women back into civilian life. I also made a short film and wrote a book called Rights to a Good Life on the necessity to mentor and initiate teens, especially boys. Part of my ambition in life is to see every teen on the planet initiated and mentored into adulthood. So toward that end, I want to make you aware of some of the free resources on our website. The two short films, Rites of Passage and Mentoring the Future, are available for free for you to download and share. You can even put your organization's brand and call to action at the end of those films and use them for fundraising or PR for your nonprofit organization. I also co-authored 6 different curricula, or toolkits we call them, that we wrote for 6 different societal sectors to help individuals and institutions understand how they can implement practices of mentorship and initiation into their regular activities. There's one for parents, one for high schools, one for colleges and universities, one for therapists, counselors, and coaches, one for community groups, and one for faith-based groups. You can find that at Warrior Films /ROP toolkits. Lastly, I co-founded an organization called Youth Passageways that was designed to be a worldwide clearinghouse of information for anyone, parents especially, seeking to find mentorship and initiation for the beloved teens in their lives. That's at youthpassageways.org. At last count, we had about 150 individuals and organizations listed there, along with numerous other resources. So if you head an organization that serves teens, please go there and register your own organization so we can help publicize your good deeds. Those are only some of the ways I've taken these ideas to the public to seed the ground with the idea that every teen deserves initiation and mentorship into adulthood. So that's my preamble. And now I want to turn to what, for me, are the key lessons for boys to become men. Now, if you yourself are an MKP man, you may recognize many of these lessons from our work. And I want to start first by acknowledging again that there are definitely many different masculinities out there, and my structure for understanding should by no means be considered somehow definitive or much less universal. So there's a kind of a generalizing alert that needs to be sounded here. Now, that said, I've also witnessed firsthand how a lot of these principles are readily adopted by many different kinds of men, different races, different ages, different classes, different cultures and nationalities, and yes, also transgendered and gay men. So the first one I want to talk about is accountability and integrity. I believe a man in his heart of hearts wants to be seen as a man of honor. He wants to know that he can be counted on to fulfill his commitments, that his word is his bond. Until a man learns how to make agreements with himself and others that he can keep, and learns how to live in integrity by renegotiating those agreements as needed, he cannot be counted on. I would argue that this matters more to men. Not that women don't care about integrity and accountability, that's of course nonsense. But as an operative practice, in my experience, men seem to give it more centralizing importance. Upholding agreements, too, is the pillar for making relationships work, and it's a fundament of social cohesion. And I invite you to consider just for a moment what kind of a world this would be if all of our political and corporate leaders were accountable. Now, the military actually teaches some of these lessons, but shockingly few other mainstream institutions emphasize it. You know, many take it as a given, but very few actually teach it. And an accountability partner or mentor can easily help a man learn how to walk his talk. Now, the second one is emotional awareness, EQ. Now, we don't really need to spend a lot of time on this today. We've been talking about it all week. But I'll just underscore that it's especially important for men today. You know, dominant Western culture still teaches men to repress their feelings. I'm saying they must be encouraged to feel their feelings, starting with being able to identify what they are and where they live in the body. And Male's been starting us off every day with wonderful variations on this exercise. As the dominant culture teaches us, it's fine for a man to control his emotions, but he must also learn to skillfully identify when, where, and how to express them. He must learn how to release them so they don't stay stuck in the body and fester until they become toxic and contribute to all kinds of mental and emotional dis-ease or disease. Until a man can claim full awareness of his feelings and appropriate expression of them, conscious control of them will mean nothing. My initiation showed me that even anger can become a force for good. It's very close to passion, and it can be harnessed and yoked to the plow of social change. Just witness Black Lives Matter, ACT UP, Me Too, and so many other movements for social change. The third one is mission or life purpose. As Jed reminded us on the first 2 days of our week here together, by quoting Mark Twain, the two most important days in a man's life are the day he's born and the day he finds out why. I put it like this: a man without a mission is a sailor without a compass. Men need to know what they're here on this planet to do, what purpose they're serving. Part of the challenge of today's economy is that many men feel lost in no longer providing what has arguably been their historic biological imperative, to provide for their family. That's largely what Susan Faludi's book, Stiffed, which I mentioned on Tuesday, is all about. I would argue that a sense of mission or purpose can be even more essential for men than for women, if for no other reason than men do not have the capability to bring forth life on their own. So serving as a protector and defender of that life can take on great importance. And to reference what Jim said yesterday, it's complicated. Yes, we can be stuck in the man box when we're performing these services, providing for our family. And it can also be a noble feature of a man's sense of self-responsibility to sacrifice himself for the well-being of others. It all really depends on how much we consciously hold this imperative while doing other needed things, about what kind of balance we can bring to our lives. And frankly, actually, as a side note, let me say that sometimes I wonder if the man box is not, in fact, a gift-wrapped package that people are so used to receiving, they forgot it's a present. It's also important to remember that living our mission serves the whole village, the whole community benefits. And since it was also mentioned the other day, Bucky Fuller, here's a quote that I believe is attributed to him, but I'm not 100% certain. When everyone does what they are most called to do, the world will live in perfect balance. Now, the fourth one, which is related to that one, is service. Who or what do you serve is a question every man needs to adequately answer. It continues to astound me that a very simple lesson is not taught to every youngster on the planet. The pathway to fulfillment and happiness is actually pretty simple, although, of course, realizing it is not typically. But find what makes you most fulfilled, what your unique gifts are, or as Dr. Howard Thurman said, what makes you come alive, or as Native Americans say, your medicine. And each one of us has some unique medicine to offer the world. Find that, and then find ways to give it to others. Stand back and watch how it serves and heals them. That's the pathway to happiness. The fifth one is community. Capitalism has taught men very well how to live in competition with each other. Most men feel like they have to compete with other men for scarce resources, property, jobs, money, material goods, women. Men need to learn how to live in cooperation with each other. And certainly men's circles of support teach this, as do rites of passage and mentorship. And lastly, the sixth point is arguably the most important for me, and that's shadow. Learn what your own darkness looks like. Get familiar with it. Find out all that you normally would hide, repress, and deny, and bring it to light. Go looking for those blind spots. The more you remain unconscious of your own shadows, the more dangerous you are to other people. Personally, I never divide people into categories of good and evil. I hope we're all beyond that at this point in our lives. I believe each of us has endless capacities for both good and evil. But what interests me is who has awareness of their shadows and who does not. Most people don't, of course. I tend to tread with more caution around them. Though they can be extremely helpful, it doesn't take a therapist to do this job. Any skillful mentor or supportive community can hold up a fierce mirror to your life and say, take a look. This is you too. Own it, learn from it, accept it, and keep it close by your side. Those are the maxims and standards that I live by. And if they serve you too, I'm gratified. And if along the way you wondered what my own personal mission is, I'll tell you that too. By living my life's deepest purpose, I inspire others to live theirs. So if I've inspired you at all today, I'm doubly gratified. I think I'll stop there. I could say more, but I want to stop.
Thank you so much, Frederick. And yeah, there are a lot of people on the chat. The chat is very active. I think they've resonated with some things and also have some questions and interventions about some things. But before we go there, maybe I'll invite the rest of our group to come on camera. And yeah, let's maybe continue this conversation. Whoever wants to chime in, just feel free to unmute and share your reflections after what Frederick has shared.
Frederick, can you just repeat number 5? Because I want to put them in the chat and I missed that one.
It's community. It's how to live cooperatively with each other instead of competitively.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe just kick off some of my reactions. One, very, very inspiring, Frederick. I mean, I've known your work for a long time. I've engaged with it in many different forms. As many found you, starting with Hoop Dreams, and as someone, as you know, who has African-American grandchildren that I do, who are involved in sports, that movie was not only enlightening, but very personally relevant to my own life. And one thing that I think you've said, but I think is worth underlining, is these values and these guidances really come out of being part of a community. They're not a separate entity that you can kind of do yourself. And I think we have to recognize, in a sense, the lineage that you talk about in your own experience. I come from a similar lineage, having done the weekend you describe and other experiences that give us the context, the container for being able to learn these practices and to be able to be supported in putting them in to our own lives, as you say, are not so simple. So we need the way that we can do it together. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I tend to define community very existentially. I mean, yes, in this case, for me, there's a literal source community, absolutely, in the Mankind Project. But in terms of ongoing life and learning, it can be any circumstance that we find ourselves in with any one or more people. I make that point when I have the privilege of serving, officiating at weddings. I like to point out that in this moment, in this time, we are a community, and we need to sort of understand and function and appreciate that as we interact with each other. So yeah, but I also don't want to diminish the importance of mentorship, because mentorship is so essential before, during, and after that identification with community.
I'd like to jump in and just thank you, Frederick, for those beautiful words. I think that was so well said, and just a lot of really great nuggets of wisdom and practical information in there. So thank you for that. And it made me think back to probably the most significant event in my life. And it was at a point where I was a young man trying to figure out my place in the world, having come out of college, wanting to make my mark, wanting to contribute something positive. I was very inspired at that point in time. And after working at my first job for the first 2.5 years, I really felt like it was all a facade. I felt like I was just a cog in the machine. I was actually doing work to advance the causes of organizations that were really trashing the environment, mining, oil and gas companies. It was my job to make them look good. And I was really good at it. And I learned from the best on how to do it. But I felt like Desdemona with blood on my hands. And I knew that that was not the right path for me. But I was really spiraling in every part of my life because I was just so miserable. And I was in a really dark place. And it was at that point, two things happened. One is I talked my way onto an account where I got to work with nonprofit organizations, and I was a young advertising executive. And I was working with 30 community-based organizations. And one of my mentors at that same time gave me Buckminster Fuller's book, Critical Path. And I was so blown away by it. It really was a gestalt shift in my life, because here, Bucky's life was clear evidence that an individual does indeed matter. He made this bold claim that he dropped out and decided not to work for money or governments or corporations. And he said he made a vow that all of his life's work was going to be for the benefit of 100% of humanity. And what an audacious thing to say. Like, can you really live up to that? But that's what he did, with hundreds of patents and inventions, each one trying to help advance humanity. And it was clear evidence that you do matter. A person does matter. It was so inspiring to me. That same month, I founded Cactus as a purpose-driven ad agency. And I can honestly say it is the single most important thing in my life, that having purpose and meaning in the work that I do, and then extending that to bringing others on board to our teams with that same promise, has just been incredibly powerful. So I just wanted to highlight that one point that you made and the power of that.
I never read the book, but and please correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand Bucky's story, as a young man, he was so depressed that he almost committed suicide.
Yeah, he was walking out into the ocean and he was going to just end it. And then he thought, well, if my life is useless, and he was a scientist through and through, he thought, well, let me conduct an experiment with my life. And that's when he vowed to only work for the benefit of all of humanity.
Yeah, a beautiful
transformational moment, right?
Exactly. I love that part of the story.
Shayna, Lisa, I know we talked about being called on unexpectedly, but I'm looking at you and I'm just wondering what's going through your mind, your feelings, as the guys are kind of having a little dialogue back and forth here, which is fine. It's wonderful. And either of you like to jump in?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. Hi, everyone. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Lisa Hickey, CEO of Goodman Media and publisher of the Goodman Project. And Frederick, I thought that your words were wonderful and inspirational, and the way you articulated those 6 points was just so clear and so compelling, and something I had never really heard of spoken quite like that before. And I'd also like to once again point everyone on who's listening today to check out the moonshotformankind.com website. And if you go to that, you'll see a pledge that Frederick wrote that's based on a lot of the ideas that he talked about today. So I'd really encourage you to go there. So I want to bring up something that came up in the chat, and the question is, why are these specific to men? And, if you were to describe mature femininity, for example, how would that look different than these points? Why are these unique to men? And I thought Betty raised a good point, that it's part of it is that these are often repressed in men, or men are given mixed messages about them. It's not that women shouldn't be held accountable, but sometimes men are told to do things at any cost, and damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and go forward and break things and don't worry about the consequences. So I think that's an interesting point that deserves a little more reflection. But the other piece of it that just sort of like deep down in my feminine, presenting as a woman, a feminist viewpoint, the piece of it that I worry is that when I look at these qualities, they're all really great leadership skills, right? Like if you embodied all of these 6 qualities that Frederick talked about, those are the hallmarks of a great leader. And so it just worries me a little bit that if you attribute those only to men, like, are you somehow giving the message that these aren't important for women, and therefore they shouldn't be seen as leaders, which, as we know, is an actual occurrence in our society. Like, there's studies that have been done that if you ask people to draw a leader, to just sit down and draw a picture of what a leader might look like, 99% of the people draw someone who looks like a man. And so I just had to bring that up, but I didn't mean to take away from the wonderful essence of what you have talked about, Frederick, because it really was great and clear and just so both inspiring and just thought-provoking to me. So those are my thoughts, since you asked, Jed. Thank you.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Lisa. For me, it just simply comes down to a point of emphasis. I would be the last person to say that these are not qualities that every woman in the world should aspire to. Absolutely not. But the purpose of my talk was to focus on men, and I could arguably give a whole nother talk where I tease out what might be slight points of difference of emphasis in each of those 6 different points between men and women. I mean, I sort of did that a little bit with accountability and integrity, but take emotional awareness, EQ. I mean, arguably, men are woefully deficient in this relative to the average woman right now. So it's all the more important for men to emphasize it. Mission or life service, life purpose. Again, I think it's absolutely essential for every human being to have this. And I would argue that a man who doesn't have a sense of mission or life purpose could be more dangerous than a man who does. So, these are just, subtle points of emphasis, really. And in fact, it's interesting because one of the things that I could have said if I'd gone on, but didn't, was, a point relative to service and serving the feminine. That lovely quote from Sitting Bull, he talks about the elderly and the infirm and the children. He doesn't mention women per se, but to my understanding and belief, it's actually the feminine. that is sort of, in a sense, the greatest calling for men in service. And by feminine, of course, I don't mean literally women, because the feminine obviously shows up in all of us to varying degrees. But it's that the mature masculine, in a sense, needs to yoke, a lot of that service energy to the well-being of women, as well as those others that I just mentioned. So anyway, those are some preliminary thoughts on that subject.
Thank
Yes.
you for, oh, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say that helped clarify it for me, so thank you, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Lisa, for bringing that up, and thank you, Frederick, for responding to that. I saw that was a very alive conversation in the chat, and I also would like to share. I think, as Frederick was mentioning, it's really good to sometimes detach feminine from females and masculine from males. What I love about these points that you shared, Frederick, is that we are really inviting men to actually have qualities, feminine and masculine qualities, very well developed, because he's including this part of integrity, accountability, which can be more of a masculine quality, but it doesn't mean just for men, right? It's just a masculine in terms of yin yang, in terms of that's more structured. And then he's also inviting men to work on their emotions and their emotional intelligence. And that's maybe more of feminine quality, but doesn't mean that it's only for females, right? So I just love that it's an invitation for men to be more whole as human beings. And something that came up for me as I heard what you were sharing, Frederick, is I heard the concept of feminine integrity and masculine integrity. And when you're in feminine integrity, you're being more committed to yourself. So for instance, I think this is very important for men in certain moments. This means I'm feeling ill. I really need to stop, and I really need to take care of myself. So that's feminine integrity. It's like I'm really listening to my body, listening to my needs, listening to what I need in the moment. And masculine integrity is being committed to your words, being committed to your commitments. So sometimes, for instance, I know that I said, let's meet at 7. And I might question, I'm just not feeling like going right now. Maybe I'll cancel. But, like there are times when, it's just out of laziness or, like just a lack of really pushing yourself to do that. And you can hold on to your masculine integrity and you go like, okay, I'm not feeling like it, but it's not because I'm ill. It's not because there's an important thing going on. It's just because I really need to maybe push myself a little bit here because this is out of my comfort zone. So I just love those two concepts and how we can play with them, and how in general, because of the way we've been conditioned as women and men in general, and of course there are a lot of exceptions, but in general, maybe men need to work on these aspects that Frederick mentioned, and maybe women, we have had to work with other ones in general. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
I think I just want to speak for a moment too to the relational aspect of this, as tends to be my orientation. And I was thinking this morning, as I was thinking about your talk, Frederick, about what it's like to know mature men, what it's like to be, I would say I was not parented, I was not fathered by a mature man, but in my life, I've had the honor and the privilege of being around many men who are mature or working toward their maturity. And I'm seeing this, like the beautiful uplifting that can happen. There's a lot of, when I work with men who come in complaining about, if they're in a heterosexual relationship, the women and what's happening and not feeling empowered, as I support them with some of your principles, the accountability, that sense of integrity, that sense of connection and service and emotional intelligence, there's like, and what I'm not saying is that men always have to go first, right? Because anyone I'm working with, I say you have to go first, and then other people will join you or follow. But there is something that happens when I see men go out into the world in these mature ways, that they uplift, their family, their relationships with their children change, their relationships with their partners change, whatever gender their partner may be. They uplift community. So it's really, I can feel in my heart the pain around a lot of the men who, are incels, and the frustration with women in the world, and that women aren't paying attention to them, and the bitterness and the resentment that to me feels like a part of immature masculinity, right? Because we can have the same pain or the same hurts around someone not paying attention to us, or someone not giving us what we want. And we can consciously communicate, right? As we look at your principles, we start to be able to consciously communicate about our needs, or about our desires, or about our, sadness and pain and hurt that these things aren't happening in our lives. It's very different than going out and just, attacking or demeaning other people, which I have a lot of compassion for, because we all know that hurt, I think most of us know that hurt people, hurt others. So I just want to thank you for laying out and having some more clarity around this mature, we could either call it masculinity, or, what mature men can aspire to, because I think it really supports our families, communities, and the world.
Thank you for that, Shana. I so agree with what you're saying, and I think that it's part of this labeling that many men feel. And so it actually brings me to another subject that's related, but I would really be remiss if I didn't share with all of you, because I'd be betraying myself. So if you'll bear with me just a couple more minutes, I have a request. And my request is, can we please all stop using the term toxic masculinity? I really think that it's pernicious and destructive to label up to half the human race with a broad and ill-defined term that is unproductive at best. And I would argue it's completely counterproductive. And are we going to also employ the term toxic femininity? And unless and until we're willing to do that, I think it's unfair to somehow go after men as the only purveyors of toxicity in the culture. Is it just men who are white supremacists and racist? No. Is it just men who are homophobic and stand against the rights of LGBTQ people? No. Is it men only who discriminate against women who are even misogynistic? No. 42% of the voters for Trump in 2016 were women, and they voted for that ogre. If that man stands for anything, he stands for toxic masculinity. So almost half of the voters voted for that poster child for sexism and sexual harassment and abuse. And if you want to look at actually another person who was most responsible for the failure of the Equal Rights Amendment for women to the Constitution in the 70s and 80s, I'd like to nominate Phyllis Schlafly, a woman from Illinois. She was the poster child for the anti-ERA movement. She did more to make sure it didn't pass than any man I know of. And so what is all that if not toxic femininity? But my point is not to do equal harm to both sexes by labeling them with a broad brush. My point is to stop labeling men and masculinity in this way. If we want progressive change in this country, we need to stop labeling individual behaviors with group smears. We might as well be making anti-Semitic comments like, well, that's just what Jews do, or racist statements like, well, Black folks, they're just that way. I'm tired of seeing men smeared in this way. I'm actually proud of my masculinity, and it took me a long, hard road to get here. So I don't want to turn off other men who might be on that same journey. So my aim is to enroll men to become co-creators of the egalitarian world that I want to bring into being, and will only put them off and turn them away, potentially reinforcing their move away from progressive possibilities for change into regressive, even repressive ones. And like you just mentioned, Shana, joining reactionary groups like the incels. Stop and think for a minute about what a horny, uncertain 18-year-old boy might be thinking. Well, anything I seem to do is going to be labeled toxic, so fuck it, I give up. I hate women. So all I'm asking for is the simple recognition that all people, all men and all women have their shadows. And individual men and women will act from those places of unconscious fear and unconscious appetite to do all kinds of harmful things, including commit violence. Have men historically done it in greater numbers and to greater degrees than women? Absolutely. But we need to distinguish between the crimes of patriarchy and the crimes of individual men. And just like with women, let's judge them as individuals, not as a group. And if we can do that, then maybe we can start to engage individual men again who might otherwise be lost forever on the other side of that toxic label called toxic masculinity. Forgive me for being on my soapbox, but I feel strongly about it. Thank you.
I say preach on, brother. I think you're hitting on something that is really, really important. And I think it would be, I think, a fantastic topic for an op-ed piece. So if you want to work on that, either individually or together, I think it's a really important message. I think it just helps, it continues to just polarize things, right? And push people and make them defensive. So I think that you're speaking the truth, and I'm grateful that you did.
Thank you, Joe and Frederick. And I want to invite Jim to this conversation.
Wow. Frederick, that's a very powerful and passionate statement that you just made. I was going to raise a couple of other issues, but since you raised that, I'd like to deepen the dialogue, if that's okay, because I think it's a sticky wicket at a time when women have been deprived of the sovereignty over their bodies. And there's an escalation in the collective political pressure on equality. And it reminded me of a parallel discussion the culture's having about critical race theory. And I think it comes down, in my view, I accept what you say, but I think that the other side of it is that after, literally thousands of years of patriarchal coercion, there's some legitimacy to finally identify that masculinity can be extremely toxic. And it's not unless and until we men individually, collectively, but also the culture recognizes the toxicity of what we've inherited, that we actually start to come to grips with what I thought was, in some ways, your most important point, was the point number 6, and that is to grapple with the shadow. And the Me Too movement was an expression, but formerly Eve Ensler, pointed out that not a single man that was brought to public accountability through the Me Too movement ever really apologized. So I really take your point, and I agree with it. And I think that it's one of those issues and situations where the opposite is always true, is also true. As Jung said, that sometimes the complexity of the psyche is such that you have what he called an antinomy, where you have two mutually exclusive truths that are internally consistent, but are really, the mind has difficulty grasping the combination of the two. So that racism is really real in the United States, and it's been toxic for several centuries, And it's also true that we've come to a point where individual accountability and responsibility is emerging. But I wouldn't want to leave that term behind quite yet, because I think the culture has yet to fully grasp the totality of the toxicity that continues to plague society to the present day. So anyway, I wanted to react a little bit because I think you're bringing in a really important point. And I think that in my mind, we haven't fully owned that toxicity, that shadow content of patriarchy. And unless and until we fully own it, will be empowered either as men or as women or as the culture to move beyond that.
Well, I want to
Does that make sense or not?
I want to jump in. It makes sense. And before we got there, I wanted to say something to Frederick at the end of his talk, which I'm going to say now, because I would be remiss if I didn't, as a warrior brother, call Frederick to examine an aspect of what he said. So first, I want to say I agree wholeheartedly with the idea that we need to, one, pay attention to the language that we use, think very clearly about it. And I also believe that the labeling of masculinity with toxic is a connection that I think needs to be broken. It's a false use of a word that I think has meaning, which I agree with. We need to look at the toxic aspects of our world, but I think we look at it more effectively if we look at it through the lens. I know of, I've talked about Riane Eisler, and she has long ago, not just recently, but 30 years ago or more, talked about not connecting patriarchy, which is another word that gets connected with a lot of negative things, and has a different word for what we're seeing, which he calls the dominator system, which doesn't associate those kinds of things with males or females. So the thing I want to call Frederick to thing, which is a little bit maybe off exactly this topic, but when you said about Donald Trump as the poster boy for toxic masculinity, I want to I say, let's not talk in those terms. There is much that is toxic about a lot that's going on, but labeling a person, even Donald Trump. Now, believe me, I have a lot of things that I have said in writing about Donald Trump and about those ideas, but I've always seen him as a wounded man. And what we do in our wounding can be very destructive, and we need to own that and call that out. But calling him, and by implication, many of the people that voted for him, as labeling, I think there's a better language and a better way of confronting those issues. So that's all I would say. And clearly there is a lot of things that we have to dialogue with each other in the context of a safe place, which is the container that allows us to disagree, allows us to hold each other to look at things in a way of also knowing respect, love, care, and those other warrior qualities that we know we aspire and we live by.
Well, thank you. We actually don't disagree. I actually, you're making my point for me.
Good.
So I was using that term, and maybe I didn't articulate it well enough, but as an example of where the limitations come in using the term. So, for exactly the same point, are we to label all these women as toxic masculine, who voted for him? So anyway, I definitely hear you, and I just would like to see the term abandoned altogether. And I like Riane Eisler's, what's her last name?
Eisler.
Suggestion of the dominatrix, not dominatrix, but
Yeah, dominator system or
Dominator system.
Yeah, partnership, domination. Those are the pairs that she wrote about in The Chalice and the Blade, and many times since then over the last 30 to 40 years.
Yeah. Well, and Jim, I want to just respond briefly to what you said. I mean, I think Al Franken was certainly one who apologized publicly for his behavior, and then also resigned from the Senate as a senator from Minnesota because of the photograph that, where he was sort of hoisted on the petard, as it were. So I think there have been some men who've done it, but my thinking orients towards what is practical and what is effective, and on the ground. And I just know that there's an awful lot of men out there who feel dismissed and abused, really, for being male. When they hear the term toxic masculinity, a lot of men start feeling like, well, I don't know what I can do anymore to not violate these terms, these standards of behavior that have not even been necessarily written out and encoded. I mean, I just saw a lot of what for me were very negative repercussions that were a result of what was arguably extremely positive movement of Me Too and Time's Up, where some of my male colleagues who I hold in great esteem were no longer mentoring women because they felt like it was too dangerous for them, that they might at any moment be called out as, for sexual abuse or harassment or whatever. So I saw rippling through, let's call it sort of the male side of the equation, a lot of these impacts that were unfortunate, and I don't think anybody would desire.
Shana, Molly, what would be your comment on toxic masculinity?
I just wanted to make a quick point that, Jed, when you said destructive, it really struck me that we can describe we can use words to describe the impact, right? There are qualities that are destructive. There are qualities that destroy versus toxic, right? If it just feels like there's so much more, I was going to say judgment, but it's not even about that. It's like, if we start to actually recognize the impact that the words we're have, like I think, Frederick, you were speaking to, okay, if a young man feels like, oh, I'm just going to be called toxic, then, it's very different than if he's questioning, is this behavior destructive or is this behavior actually, going to uplift? So I think there are ways that we can shift the language we use to be more supportive, or to inspire people to right action, or for action for the highest good, as opposed to using words that have people feel shamed or judged. Because I also think the way to shift somebody's mindset is not to shame or judge anyone. I'm a believer, in compassion and in really understanding what is underlying somebody's actions, that there is pain and there is wounding there. And how do we actually encourage change or encourage them to have a bigger perspective, a more loving perspective? To me, is actually, having compassion for where they're coming from too.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, Shana. And I loved something you shared in the chat recently, like, are we talking about people or are we talking about their behaviors? I think something as a society that we really got to work on is definitely our language, and not using so many absolutes and like saying like every, like men are like this, women are like that. All that type of language doesn't serve anyone. I really feel we have to be like kind of see person by person, behavior by behavior. Let's talk about things as they are, but addressing what is, and not generalizing, not coming from that idea of every man are toxic. And I agree with what Shana just said about, like young people. I'm thinking about children who hear these terms and they are, in their schools calling their little friends, oh, you're toxic because you're a boy. Or someone wrote this term feminazi in the chat, and I can also see, how boys would call their little girlfriends like that, So something that, like really came up for me in terms of that is, when you're a kid and when you're listening to these things since very young, you kind of just feel like that's the way to go. That's who you will become. I'm thinking of Black people who are told, oh, you little thief, you're gonna end up in jail. And that's why we have so many Black population incarcerated, right? And it's like we are almost priming boys and girls to certain things. So I really believe that's why we really need to pay attention to language. And yeah, those terms, in my opinion, don't serve anyone.
Well, it's interesting that Kim Kerrigan just asked if we would convene a program on toxic femininity to equal the playing field. And, I think what is coming up for me, I think, Molly, you're making a very important point. If you think about language right now in our culture, language itself is under assault by propaganda, by Madison Avenue, by the rapid expansion of human knowledge, the transposition of values. Let's just say, take just gender and sexuality. We're learning so much. And 50 years ago, a man was a man and a woman was a woman, and people resented the gays as they began to kind of confuse the issue from the point of view of the prevailing culture. And now, at last count, we have over 50 different gender identifications that are out there. And so just even the term gender, the term sexuality, has been so transformed by reality that really we're in a point in time where language itself is no longer an accurate way to describe what we're experiencing. And I think, Frederick, you raised a really important point around toxic masculinity. What does it really mean? How do we assess not only its accuracy, but the damage that it can do by its misapplication? We're in the middle of the woke wars. The people that are trying to reinvent new meaning through language are under assault as the reactionary forces in the culture are seeking to really challenge the kind of changes that these new categories are seeking to embody and to empower. I mean, just this conversation on men is an example of wokeness. We're trying to wake people up to a whole new way of perceiving reality. So anyway, I just wanted to put this conversation in a larger context, because I think we don't even know what truth is anymore. What fake news is anymore. Artificial intelligence with the movies now. It used to be you could tell the difference between the simulated reality and kind of the human reality. You can't tell the difference anymore. And they've been, showing that they had a study out of Stanford last year where these students were being counseled by a psychotherapist. And they were very happily, sharing their life stories and so forth. And it was only after the whole thing was over that it was revealed that it was actually a robot. It was AI. And the students had no idea. And that's how sophisticated we've gotten in blurring the categories that up to now have allowed the integrity of our language. And so I think that's something that we all need to really deal with. And I think that the fact that we've had this conversation and we've starting with you, Frederick, with the 6 points. And then, as was pointed out, they equally apply to women. And then the point you made, Molly, they apply in different ways to men and women. And yet they're the same words. It's really an extraordinary phenomenon that we're dealing with, everyone. And this conversation has exemplified both the need for the new language and the challenges of the current ambiguity in our language. So I just want to note that and honor it. And as we bring this conversation to a close, I want to touch on 2 things. One, Jed, I really want to honor you. I want to honor what you've done in terms of Men Alive. I want to honor, what you've done in terms of this impulse around a moonshot mission for men and men's health. And I think all of us appreciate the integrity with which you've exemplified manhood and the way over decades now you continue to push the boundaries and explore new frontiers. And here you are after 17 books launching a moonshot. So I just want to honor you for being you. And I'd like to invite you to just say something about the book, your book, which is coming out in a few months, so that we're all aware of it and can buy it and share it and so forth. And we'd obviously like to have you back at that time. But I think would like to, as we're closing, the first thing I wanted to do was just to honor who you are and what you're doing and appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate the appreciation. It feels almost like a birthday present. I'll be 80 this year, and I still feel like I'm doing the good work. Thank you for mentioning the book. You can kind of see it over my shoulder. I'll bring it onto center stage so that it's up close and personal. So, long live men, the moonshot mission to heal men, close the lifespan gap, and offer hope to humanity. And it will be officially out later this year, and we will be telling people about it. Here, what I would tell you is that it really isn't my book. It was written in the context of the moonshot. It included these people that you have been hearing about. I think it validates the invitation I made and the fact that these particular people have joined and they have a chapter and they were absolutely instrumental in the book, including the title of the book, the look of the book. It really is our collective book, and we will definitely be letting you know as it starts to make its debut in the world later this year.
Well, thank you, Jed, for that. We'll look out for it and obviously support it through Humanity Rising. And by the way, when is your 80th birthday?
December. My wife just turned 85 in July, so we're kind of having an 80s year of celebration. So
well, that's
December
good. Well, I'll circle back, because whatever that is in December, we're going to do a Humanity Rising tribute to you and the moonshot. And that'd be great.
That'd be great.
To the final point, I wanted to just end our 4-day program with, and that is just the importance of the moonshot. And what it is that we're seeking to accomplish here. And I'd like to just hear from each of you about what the moonshot mission means to you and why people should be going to the moonshotmissionformen.com website and signing up. So maybe starting with you, Molly, and then Shana, Frederick, and Joe. Just say a word about the Moonshot Mission for Men.
Thanks, Jim. So for me, it's really partnership between all genders, all humans, all beings, wholeness.
That's the bottom line. Thank you. Thank you. Shana?
I I feel inspired for all of us to be healthier and more conscious. And in my work with men, I really do see that men's struggles have been, pushed aside based on the idea that men have more power. Men tend to have more power. So I just feel like for all of us to heal, men's issues really do need attention. And I don't want it to take away from other groups who need attention and other issues in the world. I actually believe that men getting the attention that they need and the care and support they need really lifts us all up and heals all of us and heals our planet.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Many challenges, but the men are certainly a priority challenge in the world today. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Frederick.
Well, I certainly, of course, relate to that ultimate goal that I think we all share of, uplifting the planet, and uplifting all people and making life better for all people everywhere. But the part of the mission that I most deeply emotionally resonate with, as you've probably gotten a sense of today, is uplifting men. Yes, it's partly a reflection of my own personal journey to getting to the point where I could even understand and accept myself as a man. That was not easy for me as a teen and a man in his 20s. So I really relish the opportunity to bring support and uplift to men.
Thank you. And you do it well, Frederick. Thank you so much. Splendid presentation today.
Thank you.
Joe.
So for me, it's about impact. And, you can't change behavior until you become aware that something is an issue. And so I think that that's what the Moonshot is all about, is just raising the awareness and understanding of the importance of this issue. And then it is about getting beyond our own little circles and putting it out into the world. And we do believe that there are strength in numbers and in order for this to really take off. So I think in order to have that impact, it really is everybody who is working on this or committed to it or passionate about it, kind of pulling together and focusing that message in order for it to really hit its mark and start to change the course of our trajectory.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everything that Cactus is doing to support the Moonshot. So, Jed, any final comment from you?
Just honoring the community that is here, the people that we've met in the various chats and the after chats and so on, you, Jim, and your work and your whole team that's been doing this work for many, many years, and what a community can do when they come together and create impact. I like Joe's word because nothing happens without people coming together and coming together in smart ways to have the maximum impact to make change for the good of all.
Thank you, Jed. Thank you, everyone. That'll bring us to a close for this program. Everyone, you're welcome to join the after chat. You'll see the link in the chat box Stan has just put in. And I also want to say that this also concludes our program for the time being. We have traditionally taken the month of August off because we have so many activities and people are traveling and on holiday and so forth. So we'll reconvene Humanity Rising on Tuesday, the 5th of September, right after Labor Day. We have a very full program already completed for September, October, and now into November. So there's a lot of activity that's been going on that I'll be sustaining. We'll be in touch with everybody during the break via email. I want to thank all of you for your attentiveness to Humanity Rising. We have participants that come in from over 130 countries. We have hundreds of live streaming partners. So we really take our mission to enable humanity to rise very seriously and globally, all around the kind of solutions that are urgently imperative for us as we stand on the precipice of self-destruction to revitalize the very notion of humanity. And I think, as we've seen over the last several days, the revitalization of men, along with the liberation of women, is an essential aspect of the redemption that we all seek. We'll see you in about a month's time, and we appreciate everything that all of you have done to bring us to the present moment. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.